In this video, we're spending time in a single year, just moving slowly through the months together. Feel free to just let it play. It's unhurried and calm. Every year unfolds in its own way. This is Quiet Years, and the year is 1983. January carried the stillness that follows Christmas, when the decorations come down and the house feels larger without them. Mornings started darker than they would for weeks yet, frost pressed into car windscreens like etched glass. There was grit underfoot on the pavement, that crunchy scatter left by council trucks, noticed mostly in the moment before stepping onto the bus. The windows fogged quickly once passengers climbed aboard, damp coats pressed together in the aisle, condensation blurring the streetlights into soft halos. The bell dinged sharply at each stop. Woolworth's windows were still dressed in post-Christmas sales, bold red cards shouting reductions on things nobody particularly needed in early January. You'd duck inside anyway, hands cold in pockets, looking for batteries or perhaps something small and sweet. The high street had that scrubbed, slightly emptied feeling, the rush of December replaced by something slower. Breakfast time arrived on BBC One at 6:30, filling living rooms with a glow that hadn't been there before. The kettle boiled while soft voices talked through headlines and weather, the television becoming part of the morning routine in a way it hadn't quite managed until now. It was the sort of thing you half-watched while buttoning a coat or searching for keys, not demanding attention but offering it gently. By late afternoon, children's ITV wrapped itself around the familiar programs, a new label for the hours when bags were dropped by the door and homework was meant to begin. It didn't change much, just gave a name to the time between school and tea. Down Under by Men at Work reached #1 late in the month, that chorus slipping into shops and car radios, sounding oddly bright against grey pavements and the low sky pressing close. The Piccadilly line's Heathrow extension began serving Terminal 4, something you'd notice on platform signs and station announcements, the airport branch suddenly feeling more complete. Seat belts in the front seats became compulsory by the end of the month, an extra click before the engine turned over, a small new habit that didn't need much conversation but settled in quickly enough. Workplaces leaned heavily on desk calendars and clipboards, paper still ruling the day. You'd hear pages flipped, staplers biting down, the soft rattle of coins dropping into the tea fund tin. BBC Radio 2 revived music while you work at the start of the month, the sort of program you caught without trying, playing lightly behind paperwork and the slow afternoon stretch toward 5 o'clock. Channel 4 News introduced its Best Endeavours theme by Alan Hawkshaw, that brisk tune you'd hear from the next room while clearing plates, sitting neatly at the edge of the evening. Late in the month, Channel 4 broadcast the Super Bowl live for the first time, the sort of late-night curiosity you might stumble into while flicking channels, the unfamiliar pageantry making the sitting room feel slightly foreign before bed. CFAX page numbers were scribbled on paper beside the phone for quick checks, a quiet little ritual. The television muted, fingers tapping the remote, waiting for the blocky text to settle and deliver whatever small piece of information was needed. Early-year TV listings were studied in the Radio Times like a small weekly ceremony, programs circled with a biro, the booklet lying open on the arm of the sofa. The month carried the feel of scraped ice and breath visible in the air, shoulders tightening at the door before stepping outside. Days passed without announcement, measured in kettles boiled, coats zipped, buses caught. January didn't ask for much. It simply was. February settled in with short days and damp pavements that never quite dried. The month carried wet wool smells in school corridors and bus aisles, absorbed quietly in radiators ticking, socks drying over doors, coats hanging heavy by the entrance. Morning started with milk bottles clinking outside before dawn, glass catching the streetlight, foil tops sometimes pecked through by birds. The crate sat on the doorstep, stepped around on the way out. TVM launched at 6 o'clock on ITV, Daybreak and Good Morning Britain arriving with the light. It was there in the background while toast popped up, a new kind of morning chatter filling the kitchen before work and school. Late in the month the schedule shifted, Daybreak shortening and Good Morning Britain moving earlier, showing up in routines as a small mismatch, What people expected at a certain time was suddenly different. BBC began CFAX AM ahead of breakfast time towards the end of the month, practical and plain, headlines in block letters while the house still woke slowly. Half-term breaks arrived in different places mid-month, buses a touch quieter at rush hour. The emptier pavements near schools gave it away, along with a slight holiday mood in shops, children appearing in town centres at odd hours. W.H. Smith racks filled with Valentine's cards, bright red envelopes and foil hearts catching the eye. People hovered and pretended to browse, choosing quickly and tucking them away. Austin Metros were reported as the UK's best-selling car early on. They seemed suddenly everywhere, parked nose to curb on estates, outside schools, in supermarket car parks, small and practical and catching no one's particular attention until someone mentioned it. Sounds of the 60s aired for the first time on BBC Radio 2 mid-month, drifting through kitchens on weekend mornings while washing up water ran. Old choruses turned up between the clink of plates and the scrape of chairs, familiar without needing to be named. Too Shy by Kajagoogoo hit #1, catching in record shops and on taped compilations, the glossy sound fitting bright shop lights and the synthetic warmth of February indoors. Channel 4 debuted Cheers in the UK early in the month, becoming the kind of late evening comfort where people half-watched, half-listened, mug-warming hands, the bar setting feeling distant and easy. BBC One introduced the stop-motion children's series Gran, Something Noticed with a biscuit in hand, the animation gently holding the room still. ITV debuted Knight Rider in many regions during the month with its feature-length pilot, noticed quickly as a new talking point at school gates and work tea breaks, the car itself becoming the star. Saturday evenings still belonged to a familiar rhythm, takeaways, telly, early bedtimes. The quiet streets and steady glow behind curtains marked it, the week ending without ceremony. February didn't ask for much. It passed in the small spaces between things, measured in kettles boiled, coats sipped, buses caught in the cold. The month simply moved forward, unannounced, carrying its dampness and early dark, the year still stretching long ahead. March brought longer light but not yet warmth, the kind of month where coats stayed on indoors and umbrellas were constantly within reach. Even on brighter mornings, checking clouds became reflex, patting pockets for keys and change before stepping out. Raincoats draped over chair backs at work, never far from hand. The month moved between pale sunshine and sudden showers, absorbed as routine rather than surprise. Daffodils appeared along roadsides and in corner shop buckets, noticed on the kitchen table in jam jars, a small brightness against March's uncertain light. British summertime talk began to creep in towards the end of the month, mentioned casually, "Don't forget the clocks," as if time itself needed a small nudge forward. The year was beginning to stretch, days edging longer without announcement. Compact discs went on sale in the UK early in the month, the kind of thing seen behind shop counters, shiny and new, talked about more than actually bought. The Austin Maestro launched during the month, the name turning up in motoring pages and showroom posters, another fresh badge joining the roads. A Radio Times printing disruption led to shortages of the listings magazine, mentioned in passing, people borrowing neighbors' copies or squinting at newspaper listings instead. Billie Jean by Michael Jackson reached #1, seeming everywhere at once, shop speakers, bedroom radios, the tinny sound of cassette rewinds. It fitted the month somehow, slick and insistent, cutting through the grey. ITV debuted Police Squad. During the month, arriving as a quick, odd little burst of comedy, something quoted the next day without thinking. BBC Radio Devon and BBC Radio Cornwall expanded earlier in the year. Local place names spoken aloud on air made ordinary journeys feel a bit more named, the familiar suddenly given voice. The Grand National ran late in the month at Aintree, Corbier winning. It was noticed in the quiet hush of pub corners, people checking results while pretending not to care. Liverpool played Manchester United in the League Cup final late in the month, absorbed through quick glances at televisions and the soft rise and fall of crowd noise in living rooms, conversations pausing briefly, then carrying on. VHS hire shops kept their new releases shelves tidy and tempting, people browsing slowly, reading the backs of boxes as if choosing mattered more than it did. The sound of football coupons and pools chatter still turned up in shops and canteens, living in folded slips of paper tapped flat on counters. Corner shops stayed lit late, cigarette gantries and rows of fizzy drink bottles catching the light. People popped in for a small item and came out with more than they meant to carry, the shop bell dinging behind them. March passed without fanfare, measured in kettles clicked on, buses caught, washing hung indoors to dry. The month simply unfolded, carrying its showers and lengthening evenings, spring not quite arrived but close enough to sense. April stretched itself a little longer each evening, curtains drawn later without thinking, the hallway no longer dark at tea time. You'd notice it in the way the day seemed to hold on, light spilling quietly into routines that had felt shorter just weeks before. The kettle clicked off. A coat zip pulled closed, then open again. Someone left the television on low while folding clothes, voices drifting through from the next room, half heard and easy to ignore. Spring had settled in without announcement. Bus drivers opened windows more often now, letting in mild air and the sound of traffic, conversations overheard at stops. You felt it in your shoulders, coats unbuttoned more, scarves left at home, the weight of winter easing without ceremony. The morning still carried a chill, but it lifted by mid-morning, and by afternoon the sun felt warm enough to sit in if you found it. Garden centers and hardware shops brought out seed packets and small bags of compost, the smell of damp earth and fertilizer catching you as someone compared packets in the aisle, reading the backs with quiet concentration. The first proper washing lines started to reappear in back gardens, shirts and towels moving softly in the breeze, a quiet sign that winter had loosened its grip. Easter chocolate-filled shelves, Cadbury's cream eggs stacked high near checkouts, bought on impulse and slipped into baskets with bread and milk. You'd see them everywhere for a while, bright foil catching the light, then less, then gone. Shops cleared them quickly, making room for whatever came next. School holidays brought weekday high streets a slightly different pace. Children in uniform disappeared for a stretch, replaced by trainers, snacks, and aimless wandering near shop fronts, looking in windows with nowhere particular to be. A new season of outdoor football pitches looked brighter, chalk lines crisp after rain, muddy boots still by front doors but with less heavy clumps than before, the ground firming up. DIY shops pushed tins of paint and brushes into aisle ends, stacked neatly with rollers and dust sheets. You'd notice the smell of fresh emulsion in stairwells, a neighbor's hallway suddenly brighter when you passed, walls still tacky to the touch. Someone was always painting something this time of year, windows open to let the air through. Sunday papers felt thicker with color supplements and longer reads, sat open on sofas while the kettle went again, pages turned slowly and without urgency. Articles about gardens, recipes, advertisements for things you didn't need but looked at anyway. The boat race season arrived, with talk of Oxford and Cambridge turning up in pubs and papers. It was absorbed as a Sunday afternoon background, voices rising briefly when the boats came into view on the television, then settling back into tea and biscuits, the room quiet again. On Saturday mornings, ITV launched number 73 nationally as a children's show. You'd catch it with cereal bowls still out, the sort of bright noise that made the weekend feel properly started, cartoons and games and phone-ins that didn't require full attention. BBC Two launched Entertainment USA presented by Jonathan King, arriving like a glossy window into showbiz, something you'd watch while ironing or tidying, half attending, the screen flickering with faces and stages from somewhere else entirely. Let's Dance by David Bowie spent weeks at number 1 this month. It was the kind of song you heard in passing, from a radio in a shop doorway, through a car window at the lights, in the background at work, and found yourself humming while waiting at the till or walking home, the melody lodged there without effort. The Vauxhall Nova was launched during the month, appearing in adverts and dealership windows, another small car shape joining car parks and curbsides, unremarkable except for its newness, people pausing to look at the price stickers. Late in the month, the £1 coin was introduced in England and Wales. You'd notice it first in your palm, heavier than expected, thicker than seemed necessary, then in tills, purses, and the way people paused to look before slipping it in with the rest. Shopkeepers turned them over, checking the design, getting used to the weight. It felt solid, unfamiliar, something that would take a while to stop being noticed every time it appeared in your change. The rhythm of the days moved on. Buses pulled away, doors closing with their familiar hiss. Someone made tea and left it to cool while reading the back of a cereal box, then forgot about it entirely. The television stayed on, moving from one program to the next, voices filling the room whether anyone was properly watching or not. Washing up sat in the sink a little longer. Letters waited on the hall table to be posted. Small tasks deferred, then remembered, then done without thinking. Evenings felt gentler now, the urgency of winter gone. You could stand outside for a moment without needing to hurry back in, watching the light fade slowly, hearing distant sounds, a dog barking, a car door, someone calling a name. The street lamps came on later, their orange glow less necessary, but they're all the same. People walked slower, stopped to talk at gates, lingered at bus stops even after the bus had gone. The month passed the way months do, each day adding to the next, unremarkable except in hindsight. The kettle boiled. The post arrived. Someone switched channels. The light lasted a little longer. May stretched the evenings further, windows cracked open instead of tightly shut, distant traffic and birdsong staying audible longer into the night. Sounds that had been muffled by winter now drifted through rooms where the television played low and someone read the paper with their shoes off. The kettle clicked off. A coat was hung up and left there. The rhythm of the day stretched out a little further, unhurried. High streets looked busier in the late afternoons, with longer light and looser pace. It was felt in the way people lingered outside shops, talking without hurrying, leaning against walls in the sun, carrier bags set down for a moment. Trainers and lighter jackets became more common than heavy coats, noticed in crowds, more bare forearms, fewer scarves, the weight of clothing easing without anyone remarking on it. You'd see it in bus queues and at pedestrian crossings, people standing differently, less hunched, hands in pockets but relaxed. Local parks filled with prams, radios, and the quiet clink of glass bottles in carrier bags. It was the sound of ordinary leisure, not planned, just happening. Someone lying on a bench with a newspaper over their face, children running in circles, dogs off leads for a moment. Bank holiday weekends brought garden chairs and small disposable barbecues into view, smoke drifting over fences, burgers turning somewhere nearby, the smell mixing with cut grass and washing left out too long. Hanging baskets and bedding plants filled market stalls, colors bright against the gray of the pavement. You'd notice them while carrying groceries, hands briefly brushing petals as you passed, vendors calling prices without much conviction. Corner shops stocked more ice lollies near the front, children asking for them with coins warmed in their hands, wrappers discarded within minutes. School summer terms felt settled, with sports kits and plimsolls remembered at the last minute, bags left on doorsteps, children called back for forgotten things, the urgency mild and routine. Roadwork signs and cones seemed to multiply in the mild weather, new delays on familiar routes, diversions learned by habit. You'd sit in traffic longer, windows down, hearing radios from other cars, someone tapping a steering wheel. Wheel clamps were first used in London to combat illegal parking during the month, noticed as a sudden, hard-looking presence on a street, bright metal where a car should simply be waiting. People stopped to look, pointing them out, the newness of it something to remark on briefly before moving along. Manchester United and Brighton drew in the FA Cup final at Wembley, with the replay later in the month. It was absorbed through television chatter and pub silence, the match becoming the day's main background noise, voices rising at near misses, then settling again. Pints were set down. Someone shifted in their seat. The result felt unfinished, suspended, something to be dealt with later. ITV debuted Alfresco, filmed entirely on location, feeling loose and different, something you half-watch while making another cup of tea, the format unclear but not off-putting. BBC and Channel 4 expanded daytime teletext patterns, with Oracle on View and Foretell on View appearing in short bursts. You'd flick onto it while waiting for programs, reading blocky listings like they were tiny newspapers, the information minimal but oddly satisfying, pages cycling through weather, news, television schedules in bright primary colors. Candy Girl by New Edition reached #1 at the end of the month, heard through open shop doors, the rhythm following you for a few steps along the pavement, lodging itself there without effort. The Leicester Square premiere buzz for Educating Rita arrived in the month as film adverts appeared in London papers, noticed as posters and talk of a proper British film, the title repeated without much fuss, something people said they might see if they got round to it. The days moved through their routines with the television left on, voices filling rooms whether anyone was properly watching or not. Washing up sat in the sink. Letters waited to be posted. Small tasks deferred, then remembered, then done without thinking. Someone made a sandwich and ate it standing up. The post arrived later than usual. A neighbor's cat sat on a warm wall, unbothered. The light lasted longer now, stretching into evening without the abruptness of winter, the sun taking its time to set. You could stand outside and not feel the need to go back in immediately, watching the sky change color, hearing children still playing somewhere, the sound of a football being kicked against a wall, voices calling names. The street lamps came on later, their orange glow less necessary, but they're all the same, a rhythm everyone had learned without noticing. The month passed the way months do, each day adding to the next, unremarkable except in the aggregate. The kettle boiled. The post arrived. Someone switched channels. The light lasted a little longer, and that was enough. June opened with mornings that felt brighter earlier, the day already moving before alarms had properly finished. You'd wake to birds before anything else, sounds that had been distant in darker months now close and insistent. The kettle clicked off. A window stayed open from the night before. Someone left the television on low while making breakfast, voices drifting through without demanding attention. Early in the month, Leicester Piggott won the Epsom Derby on Tinoso, noticed as a quick burst of summer sport, names repeated over the radio while plates were cleared, the commentary half heard and absorbed anyway. The James Bond film Octopussy was released in UK cinemas early in the month, posters outside Odeons everywhere, Roger Moore's face appearing on bus shelters and in newspaper ads, the familiar shape of something people would either see or miss without much fuss. Exam season brought quiet, tense mornings outside schools. You'd see pencils checked twice and ties adjusted, parents waiting a moment longer at the gate, saying nothing much but staying anyway. The routine shifted, classrooms emptier in the afternoons, buses quieter at certain times, the weight of it felt even if you weren't sitting the exams yourself. BBC One aired The Last for Schools, colleges programs before the autumn moved to BBC Two, noticed in classrooms, projectors whirring, televisions wheeled in on their tall metal stands, lessons briefly rearranged, the change mentioned but not dwelt on. The smell of fresh-cut grass became a regular part of walking routes, absorbed in passing, park edges, verges, and the hum of mowers starting up mid-morning and continuing into early evening. Strawberries began appearing more reliably on market stalls, noticed as a small luxury, carried home carefully in a punnet, sometimes eaten before the front door closed. High street chemists displayed sunscreen and after-sun more prominently, near the tills, bought as if summer might arrive properly any day, the optimism mild and routine. Buses ran with open-top vents and a slightly lighter mood onboard, fewer heavy coats pressed together, more shopping bags and bare arms, people sitting differently, less hunched. You'd notice it in the way conversations carried, louder but not forced, the space feeling less crowded even when it wasn't. Evening television often competed with the simple temptation of staying outside, the house quieter, windows open, voices drifting from gardens, someone watering plants or just standing there with a mug, not ready to go back in yet. BBC One broadcast the first episode of The Blackadder mid-month, slipping into the evening schedule like a new companion, watched with feet up and lights low, the humor dry and a little strange, something to return to or not. Bob Monkhouse hosted his final episode of Family Fortunes during the month, the kind of change you clocked only when someone mentioned it, an old slot quietly turning a page, the continuity announcer's voice filling the gap before the next program started. Every Breath You Take by The Police sat at #1 through much of the month, heard at soft volume in shops, the melody hanging in the air as you queued, following you out onto the pavement and staying there. Flashdance reached UK cinemas by the end of the month, the title on cinema boards noticed in passing, and what a feeling spilling from record shops, bright and insistent, impossible to avoid for long. School end-of-term events began to appear in diaries, sports days and small performances mentioned casually, penciled in, half forgotten until the morning arrived and someone remembered at the last minute, grabbing a cardigan or checking the time. You'd see parents gathered on playing fields, standing in uneven rows, clapping politely, children running in borrowed plimsolls or sitting cross-legged waiting for their turn. The days moved through their routines with the light lasting longer, stretching into evening without urgency. Washing up sat in the sink. Letters waited to be posted. Small tasks deferred, then remembered, then done without thinking. Someone made a sandwich and ate it standing by the window, watching nothing in particular. The post arrived. A neighbor's radio played faintly through an open door. The cat sat in a square of sun on the carpet, shifting as the light moved. The rhythm of it all felt looser now, less contained. You could leave the house without checking the weather, walk without a destination, stop to look in a shop window and not feel rushed. The street lamps came on later, their orange glow barely needed, a habit the day hadn't quite let go of yet. The month passed the way months do, each day adding to the next, unremarkable except in the aggregate. The kettle boiled. The television stayed on. The light lasted a little longer, and that was enough. July became exceptionally hot, setting a record monthly mean in the CET series, noticed in sticky shirt backs, sunlit pavements, and the way sleep came slower at night. Bedrooms felt too warm for heavy blankets, windows wide, curtains barely moving, the street still awake with voices and the occasional car passing. The kettle clicked off. Someone made tea and let it sit too long, forgetting it until it was lukewarm and unwanted. Ice cream vans became a familiar sound on residential streets, the tune drifting through open windows, heads turning, people checking pockets for change. Children appeared with melting cones, wrappers discarded on walls, the smell of vanilla and strawberry hanging in the air. Shops pushed electric fans into aisle ends, boxes stacked high, carried home like practical trophies, arms strained in the heat, the relief of switching them on immediate and temporary. Shorts and sleeveless tops appeared more openly, even in town centers, noticed as a small shift in what felt normal, skin catching the sun at bus stops, people standing differently, less covered, less formal. Evening pubs felt louder with doors open, spilling talk onto the pavement, laughter hanging in warm air, glasses clinking as if it were always Friday. Local parks stayed busy late, with picnics stretching beyond tea time, blankets still down as the light softened, people reluctant to go indoors, the day too good to waste. Return of the Jedi was in UK cinemas after its early summer release, queues outside big cinemas noticed in passing, children clutching fizzy drinks, posters bright against the heat, the film something people mentioned without needing to explain. Baby Jane by Rod Stewart was #1 on the UK singles chart this month, turning up in car radios with the windows down, the song carrying out into the street, following you for a few steps before fading into traffic noise. Wimbledon Fortnight dominated television attention, with centre court filling afternoons. You'd notice it in offices and living rooms, commentary murmuring while fans turned and papers piled up, the rhythm of the game absorbed without full attention, applause rising and falling, someone mentioning the score without looking up. BBC Radio York launched early in the month, familiar place names spoken with extra care, the station feeling like a new local voice, something tuned into while driving or pottering about, half listened to and somehow comforting. The smell of warm tarmac rose after brief showers, noticed in a single breath while crossing a road, then gone again, replaced by the heat returning even stronger. Summer holiday planning showed up in coach timetables pinned behind travel agent windows, paused at to read them, fingers tracing destinations that might never actually be booked, the idea of going somewhere enough for now. Ford began producing the Ford Orion at Halewood during the month, The sort of detail seen in local papers or heard from someone who knew someone on the line, mentioned in passing, part of the background noise of work and industry that shaped the rhythm of certain towns. Newspapers carried more light summer features, holidays, gardens, small competitions, leafed through slowly, pages sticking a little to sun-warmed fingers, the content easy and undemanding. The days moved through their routines with the heat as a constant companion. Washing up sat in the sink longer, the effort of moving through warm air making small tasks feel larger. Letters waited to be posted. Someone made a sandwich and ate it standing by the open fridge, the cool air a brief relief. The post arrived later, the postman moving slower, everyone moving slower, the urgency of other months absent. The light lasted deep into the evening, stretching on without apology, the sun taking its time to set, the sky staying bright longer than seemed reasonable. Street lamps came on late, their orange glow unnecessary, but they're all the same, a habit no one had bothered to change. You'd notice people still outside at hours that would have been indoors in winter, watering gardens, sitting on doorsteps, talking over fences, the day refusing to end properly. The rhythm of it all felt suspended, as if the month had decided to linger. You could leave the house without thinking about what to wear, walk without urgency, stop to look at nothing in particular and not feel the need to move on. The television stayed on with the sound low, competing with open windows and the sound of summer happening elsewhere. Lawn mowers, children playing, radios from neighboring gardens, the hum of it all blending together. August carried the heat from July without the surprise of it. Hot weather pushed London temperatures to around 30 degrees Celsius during the month, felt in slow commutes and sunburnt shoulders, the city looking slightly bleached, colors washed out by the glare. Evenings stayed long, with late light still holding onto the edges of the day, noticed when the street didn't feel like night at all, even after the news had finished and people were putting mugs in the sink. Houses were aired out more, windows open wide for hours, distant radios and neighbor talk traveling further than usual, conversations overheard without meaning to. Late summer mosquitoes and midges became part of open window life, noticed as tiny irritations, slaps at ankles, the soft buzz near lamps, curtains drawn against them eventually but reluctantly. The kettle clicked off. Someone made tea and forgot about it, finding it later, cold and unwanted. New A-prefix car registration plates launched at the start of the month, fresher plates on brand new cars noticed in passing, a crisp little marker of the year appearing in car parks and at traffic lights, something people pointed out briefly before moving on. Town centre shops leaned into end-of-season sales, rails pulled onto the pavement, brushed past outside doorways, fabrics shifting in warm air, prices reduced but not drastically, the gesture half-hearted. School summer holidays gave weekday mornings a different feel in residential streets, noticed in bicycles leaning against fences and the slower rhythm of midday, children appearing at odd hours, the structure of term time gone. Seaside postcards filled racks, bright photos of piers and donkey rides, chosen quickly at cafe tables, names written in biro, stamps licked and stuck while waiting for food to arrive. Coaches to the coast looked fuller, luggage stacked in the undercarriage bays, people fanning leaflets and crisps, settling in for long motorway miles, the journey part of the holiday itself. Picnic food, Scotch eggs, sausage rolls, bottles of pop, stacked high in supermarkets, noticed in baskets heavy with easy eating, bought for parks and car journeys, consumed quickly and without ceremony. Sunglasses and cheap plastic beach toys filled market stalls, handled casually, tried on, put back, bought at the last second, the decision made without much thought. Give It Up by KC and the Sunshine Band reached #1 this month, coming through open shop doors and radios in parked cars, sounding like sunshine even indoors, the kind of song that followed you down the street and stayed there. ITV launched Blockbusters, hosted by Bob Holness, late in the month, becoming a cozy tea-time fixture almost immediately, watched with snacks and a pen tapping idly on the arm of the sofa, the questions half answered, half ignored. BBC Two ran Rocks Around the Clock, a continuous run of music programs across a full day and night, something you might stumble across late, the TV still on, music rolling on as if time didn't matter, the screen flickering in dark rooms. Radio Caroline resumed broadcasting in an album-oriented rock format late in the month, someone mentioning finding it on the dial, the idea of a pirate signal adding a quiet thrill, the sound crackling but there. The days moved through their routines with the heat still present but softening slightly, the intensity of July easing without disappearing entirely. Washing up sat in the sink. Letters waited to be posted. Small tasks deferred, then remembered, then done without thinking. Someone made a sandwich and ate it standing by the window, watching nothing in particular. The post arrived. A neighbor's cat sat in shade, avoiding the sun now. The rhythm of it all felt looser, less urgent. You could leave the house without planning, walk without purpose, stop to look at something and not feel the need to justify it. The television stayed on with the sound low, competing with open windows and the sound of summer winding down. Lawn mowers less frequent now, children's voices a little quieter, the hum of it all softening into something easier to ignore. Street lamps came on later, their orange glow still unnecessary but appearing all the same, a habit no one had adjusted. People still sat outside at hours that would have been indoors in other months, on doorsteps, in gardens, talking over fences, the day stretching on without apology. September tightened the rhythm of ordinary days. New school terms began, uniform shops and shoe departments coming back to life, tape measures pulled out, shoe-fitting stools occupied, children standing still while adults checked hems and tutted about growth spurts. Pencil cases, geometry sets, and packs of biros filled W.H. Smith displays again, the smell of new stationery, crisp and plasticky, noticed in passing as the season turned practical. Buses carried more school bags again, straps creaking as people stood, the return of that particular noise, zip fasteners, packed lunches, tired chatter, filling morning journeys. Commuter trains felt busier again after holiday season, platforms more tightly packed, shoulder-to-shoulder carriages and the small impatience of Monday mornings absorbed as if they'd never been away. Someone made tea and stood by the window watching rain fall steadily, the kind that made pavements shine. Rain returned in steadier spells, umbrellas blooming at crossings, the damp smell in entryways becoming familiar again. Evenings grew darker sooner, and lamps were switched on earlier without thinking, absorbed in the quiet shift from summer light to indoor light, curtains drawn by tea time where they'd stayed open until late just weeks before. Sunday evenings had a more term time feel again, quieter and earlier, baths run sooner, lunches prepared, the week gently lining up ahead. Conkers began appearing under trees, shiny and tempting on the ground, collected in pockets, held up for inspection, then forgotten by the time someone got home. Shops began showing darker knitwear and jackets nearer the front, mannequins dressed for cooler days even if afternoons still felt mild, the suggestion of autumn arriving before the weather had fully committed. Ford launched the second-generation Fiesta and the Orion during the month, the names seen in adverts and showroom banners, new models joining the steady flow of traffic, something people noticed briefly while waiting at lights or walking past dealerships. Red Wine by UB40 reached #1 this month, drifting out of pubs and corner shops, sounding mellow against the first cooler evenings, the kind of song that fitted the mood without demanding attention. BBC One began showing Remington Steele early in the month, slipping into evening viewing as a smooth new series, watched with a quiet sense of routine, feet up, television left on after the news. Henry's Cat debuted on BBC One during the month, feeling like a gentle moment in the day, animation that asked for very little attention, something children watched while adults tidied up nearby. Joe Strummer and Paul Simonon announced Mick Jones had been fired from The Clash early in the month, noticed as a short headline in music pages, talked about briefly over tea or at bus stops, then folded away with the paper, the conversation moving on. New autumn TV schedules began to feel fuller, with more fresh titles in listings, more circling and underlining in the radio times, plans forming around airtimes, programs mentioned and then forgotten until they actually appeared. The days moved through their routines with a different rhythm now, less loose, more contained. Washing up sat in the sink but got done sooner. Letters were posted more promptly. Small tasks remembered and completed without as much deferral. Someone made a sandwich and ate it at the table instead of standing, the kitchen light on even though it was still afternoon. The pace felt tighter, more structured. You could leave the house but knew you'd need a coat by evening, walk with purpose rather than drift, check the time more often. The television stayed on with the sound up slightly, competing less with open windows and more with the hum of household life resuming. Homework spread on tables, phone calls about arrangements, the sound of term beginning again. Street lamps came on earlier, their orange glow necessary now, lighting paths home from work or school, the walk feeling different in the dusk. People moved faster, less inclined to linger, getting indoors before the temperature dropped properly. The month passed the way September months do, each day similar to the last but with a gathering sense of autumn arriving properly, not just threatening. The television stayed on. The light faded earlier, and that was how it would be now. October settled in with shorter days and the first real coat and scarf mornings, breath showing again at bus stops, absorbed in the quick zip-up before leaving, hands shoved deeper into pockets. Clocks went back towards the end of the month, bringing earlier darkness, noticed most at tea time, lights on in living rooms while the day still felt unfinished. Car headlights came on earlier in the afternoon as skies dulled, the glow seen along wet roads, reflections stretching behind tires. Leaf piles gathered along curbs, swept into corners by wind, kicked apart by passing feet, that dry rustle following you down the street. The air carried a damp chill now, the kind that made coats feel necessary rather than precautionary. Pubs and cafes felt cozier, windows steaming slightly from warmth inside, people lingering with hot drinks, conversations slowing down, reluctant to step back out into the cold. Richard Noble set a new land speed record in thrust too early in the month, noticed as a bright, proud headline, the kind you read while stirring tea and thinking good on him, then moving on to other news. Karma Chameleon by Culture Club began its long run at number 1 this month, turning up in shops and taxis, colorful and familiar within days, the kind of song that lodged itself there without effort. BBC One debuted Banana Man early in the month, becoming a small daily delight, watched half-dressed for school, laughs popping up in the hallway before anyone had properly woken up. Super Ted arrived during the month like a new friend on the screen, cheerful and reassuring as evenings drew in, something children watched while adults moved around the kitchen preparing tea. BBC Radio Brighton expanded and was renamed BBC Radio Sussex late in the month. The new name said clearly on air, a small relabeling that made the county feel closer, mentioned briefly and then accepted. School nights felt more settled, homework at the table, the sound of pages turning, pencils tapping, radios turned low, the routine fully established now, no longer negotiated. Halloween bits appeared, paper masks and small sweet bags, often in bargain shops, noticed while buying something else, a sudden flash of orange and black near the tills, picked up by children and considered, sometimes bought, sometimes put back. Supermarket shelves began to show early Christmas hints, puddings and tins appearing quietly at the ends of aisles, noticed without buying, just clocking that the year was turning, the thought filed away for later. TV evenings felt longer, with more time in after dark, the sofa becoming the main place again, channels flipped lazily, programs watched without full attention, the television more companion than entertainment. Washing up sat in the sink longer again, the motivation to tackle it diminished by the warmth indoors and the cold beyond the window. Letters were posted when remembered. Someone made a sandwich and ate it on the sofa, crumbs brushed away half-heartedly. The rhythm of it all felt slower, more contained within 4 walls. You could leave the house but needed to think about it first. Coat, scarf, keys, umbrella maybe, the spontaneity of warmer months gone. Walks were shorter, more purposeful, less inclined to wander. The television stayed on with the sound up, filling rooms that felt quieter without open windows, voices from the screen replacing the ambient sounds of summer. Street lamps came on earlier, their orange glow necessary now, lighting paths home from work or school, the walk feeling colder as the month progressed. People moved faster, less inclined to stop and chat, getting indoors before the temperature dropped properly. Bus shelters filled earlier, bodies pressed closer, breath visible in shared space, everyone waiting with the same mild impatience. The month passed the way autumn months do, each day darker than the last, unremarkable except in the way they accumulated into a feeling of winter approaching. The television stayed on. The light faded earlier. Coats stayed by the door, ready for the next departure, and that was how it would be now. November arrived with foggy mornings and damp air that clung to coats, noticed as soon as you stepped outside. The world slightly softened at the edges. Bus queues formed in the dark, people shifting from foot to foot under streetlights, the quiet patience absorbed, breath visible, collars turned up against the chill. The walk to work or school felt longer somehow, the cold making every step deliberate. Warm drinks, instant cocoa, tea, soup, felt more central to the day, mugs appearing more often on desks, steam rising in small pauses between tasks. Knitwear filled shop windows, thick jumpers, cardigans, wool hats, the textures noticed even while walking past, imagining warmth before you actually needed it. Indoor routines tightened, early nights, books, radio, the steady comfort of being in, the same chairs taken again, the same lamps switched on, the same quiet settling. Auf Wiedersehen, Pet debuted on ITV during the month, becoming a new shared reference quickly, names and lines repeated softly at work, the kind of show people talked about without making much of it. Uptown Girl by Billy Joel was #1 this month, popping up cheerfully in shops and on radios, a bright tune against darker afternoons, impossible to avoid and easy to hum along to without thinking. The Walton sextuplets were born in Liverpool mid-month and became widely reported, noticed as a warm human interest story, mentioned over the counter in shops and then carried on from, the kind of news that made people smile briefly. The M54 motorway opened, linking the M6 north of Wolverhampton with Telford, noticed in traffic updates and route talk, people casually replanning journeys, the change absorbed into the everyday geography of travel. ITV broadcast the final edition of Sale of the Century during the month, feeling like an old fixture quietly leaving, noticed properly only when someone said that's the last one, the slot filling with something else the following week. The first Now That's What I Call Music album was released late in the month, the bold title noticed in record shops, people buying it as an easy gift without overthinking, the compilation format feeling new but immediately familiar. Bonfire night filled the air with fireworks crackle and damp smoke, noticed from the sofa, sudden flashes at the window, distant cheers, then quiet again. The smell lingered the next morning, hanging in gardens and on clothes left outside. High streets grew busier earlier in the evening as Christmas shopping began properly, carrier bags in more hands, shop doors opening and closing constantly, the season arriving without announcement but impossible to miss. Television adverts leaned into gift ideas, electric shavers, perfumes, toy robots, noticed without listening closely, yet somehow the slogan stayed there, repeated back later without meaning to. Sundays felt slower, with roasts and the sound of pans in warm kitchens, the smell traveling up stairwells, the day gently narrowing toward evening and the week ahead. The days moved through their routines with less variation now, the cold keeping things predictable. Washing up was done sooner to avoid cold water later. Letters were posted on the way to somewhere else. Someone made a sandwich and ate it quickly, standing by the radiator for warmth. The post arrived, was opened, was dealt with or set aside for later. The rhythm felt tighter, more contained. You could leave the house but needed several layers, the spontaneity of warmer months completely gone now. Walks were necessary rather than pleasant, undertaken with purpose, to the shops, to work, back home, the cold making lingering outside unappealing. The television stayed on with the sound up, filling rooms that felt smaller in winter, voices from the screen the main company in darker evenings. Street lamps were already on by late afternoon, their orange glow necessary long before tea time, lighting paths that felt colder with each passing week. People moved quickly between destinations, less inclined to stop, everyone heading somewhere warmer. Bus shelters filled and emptied in waves, bodies pressed together briefly, then dispersing as buses arrived and departed. December arrived with Christmas lights in high streets, switched on in the early dark, the glow reflecting in puddles, making even routine errands feel slightly softer. The month carried cold air and early dusk, the day closing in gently, noticed most when you stepped outside at what felt like afternoon and found it already night. A coat zip pulled up. Bus doors closed with their familiar hiss. Someone walked home quickly, breath visible in the streetlight. Post offices felt busier with cards, parcels, and long queues, people holding stamps and pens, writing addresses against the counter edge, the scratch of biro audible in the crowded warmth. Kitchens filled with small seasonal staples, mince pies, tins, and bags of mixed nuts, accumulating on cupboards, bought just in case, then opened anyway. The Radio Times Christmas double issue became a household object, opened and reopened, pages dog-eared quickly, schedules becoming part of the decoration, circled programs marking the days ahead. Toy departments filled with Transformers boxes and bright plastic packaging, parents pausing, scanning shelves carefully, then carrying awkward shapes to the till, the weight of Christmas expectations held in carrier bags. Office and workplace corners hosted small collections, paper hats, biscuits, cheap tinsel, the quiet effort to make it feel festive without making a fuss, someone bringing in cake, another bringing cards that sat on desks until the holiday arrived. Britain's first heart and lung transplant was carried out at Harefield Hospital early in the month, noticed as a calm, remarkable headline, read once and then folded away with the paper, the achievement absorbed quietly. The House of Lords voted to allow television broadcast of its proceedings early in the month, feeling like one of those things-a-changing items, mentioned briefly and then replaced by shopping lists and what to get for dinner. Never Say Never Again reached UK cinemas in the middle of the month, Bond posters appearing everywhere, part of the seasonal cinema habit, queues forming outside Odeons, the familiar shape of espionage and adventure offering a comfortable escape. Only You by the Flying Pickets reached #1 during the month, drifting through shops and living rooms like warm air, fitting the season without pushing, the harmonies oddly soothing against the rush. BBC Two showed CFAX continuously through the daytime as a new all-day pattern, noticed if the TV was left on, blocky pages holding the screen like a quiet waiting room, weather and news cycling through in primary colours. BBC aired a live league match, Manchester United vs Tottenham Hotspur, as a notable football broadcast this month, the match drawing people in midweek, the sound of commentary cutting through ordinary evenings, pubs fuller than usual, living rooms rearranged around screens. The days moved through their routines with Christmas pulling everything slightly off scent. Washing up was left longer. Letters were written and rewritten. Someone wrapped presents badly, tape everywhere, paper cut at odd angles. The television stayed on more, competing with radio in other rooms, the house filled with overlapping voices and music, no one fully attending to either. The rhythm felt both slower and more urgent, time collapsing into lists and preparations while also stretching out in moments of nothing particular, standing by a window, watching rain, forgetting what you'd come upstairs for. You could leave the house for last-minute shopping and find yourself caught in crowds, everyone moving with the same mild determination, carrier bags multiplying, faces tired but not unhappy. Street lamps came on by mid-afternoon, their orange glow necessary long before tea time, lighting paths that felt colder but somehow more purposeful. People moved quickly between shops, less inclined to browse, everyone ticking things off, getting it done. Bus shelters emptied and filled in familiar waves, bodies pressed together, everyone heading somewhere they needed to be. Christmas Eve streets became quieter earlier, shops closing, homes glowing, the sudden calm noticed after weeks of building noise and activity. BBC One showed Disney's Treasure Island on Christmas Day, sitting gently in the day's background, watched between chocolates and cups of tea, the film familiar enough to drift in and out of attention, voices from the screen mixing with voices from the kitchen. The year turned itself over quietly. 12 months of ordinary days, each one moving into the next without announcement. Mornings at bus stops, evenings with the television left on low, the sound filling rooms whether anyone was properly watching or not. Spring brought lighter evenings and the £1 coin turning up in change. Summer pushed temperatures higher than expected, every breath you take following you down streets. Autumn tightened things again, new school terms, coats by the door, lamps switched on earlier. Winter settled in with Christmas lights and only you drifting through shops like warm air. The programs came and went: the Blackadder, Blockbusters, Auf Wiedersehen, Pet. Headlines were read and folded away: Richard Noble's land speed record, the Walton sextuplets. New cars appeared in showrooms. Queues formed and dispersed. The post arrived. Someone made tea and forgot about it. None of it felt remarkable at the time. Just the texture of life as it happened: routine, weather, small comforts. The year moved through its routines the way years do, each day ordinary except in the way they accumulated into something larger. And somewhere, quietly, without anyone marking it, 1983 became 1984.